Call to order this Milburn Community College Consolidated School District 24 Board of Education Committee of the Whole meeting, September 13th, 2021. Can I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Boss?
Present.
Mr. Coleman?
Present.
Mr. Gray? Mr. Lorenzen?
Present.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Pedalini?
Present.
Mr. Quinones?
Here. Welcome, everyone. Shall we stand for the pledge? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to point out that this picture was taken by one of our middle school students last week, and I said, well, that's really cool, can I take it? So let me use it for our board meeting.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I was wondering where the front of the school was.
good job, Dylan. No, this is at the middle school, so
Nice. Good job, Dylan.
it's a good picture.
Do we have any public comments? No. Does anyone have any additions or for information or discussion? Information discussion of the first reading of board policies. Everyone read them, or does anyone have any questions or comments on any of these?
I'm going to review these deeper and then prior to any vote, call out anything that I think might be of interest.
So there's a couple of new ones this year. Other than that, doesn't look like anything special. House lease lottery.
Okay, so just as a little bit of background and a reminder, we own the property next to the school where the garden sits on. There's also a house with that property, and we lease that property, and not for profit, but in lieu of, or in exchange of labor for someone to check our building. So it has to be a Milburn employee that is in that property, and there's a whole list of other criteria, but they basically do the building checks on the weekends, and it's nice to have somebody living right there that we know is watching the buildings and the property all the time. So we have set it up so that, to be fair, if someone can live there a certain number of years, and then we do a lottery every 3, 4, 5 years or so, and give someone else a chance. So tonight is the lottery, so we sent out an email a couple weeks ago saying anybody that's interested needs to let us know, and they'll be in the drawing tonight just to see if they win and are interested. It doesn't mean they have to take it, because it doesn't really turn over till next July 1st is when the turnover date. We want to give the current residents plenty of time to look for housing if in fact someone else would like to take that over. So there's lots more discussion and vetting to go. It doesn't mean that people we draw tonight are actually going to take over, but we want to give them a chance so they have first right of refusal, second right of refusal, and so on. There's 3 people who are interested in this, so there are only 3 cards to draw, and I will have our board president draw them. I will shuffle them. I do not know there's no names on them, nothing. Veronica prepared them. I do not have any stake in this. And so the first card, just right on there, that's the first one, so we don't mix. And now take the second. And the third. Perfect. And now you would open those and read those orders. Again, it doesn't mean that the first person has to take the property, but they can certainly review it, discuss it, and look at it with us.
First person is Stacy Bergman.
Stacy Bergman, okay?
A one. So somebody might forget. Seal these really well.
They're
Second,
hermetically sealed.
Catherine Kennedy. And the third. Marina Vivian.
Yep, Mariana, baby.
Mariana Vivian. There you go.
Okay, so we will talk to them, we will go over the requirements, make sure that they understand what the responsibilities are, give them a tour of the home, and then, they'll have a deadline to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiscal year 2022 budget review.
Okay. I guess first off, does anybody have any questions or anything about the budget they want to discuss? And if you don't, I want to walk you through one of the pages in the budget to kind of show you how to read it and get the most information you can out of it. But first, does anybody have any questions or anything that from the last time that you have questions about?
Am I on the right page, Dr.
Yep, you
Nance?
sure are. And we're gonna start with, we're gonna just look at the education fund, and I think I'll kind of go down through that one. Leave the first three columns open, because when we get to the transfers, I want them to be able to see where the money goes. There, that's good. So the, and this budget is on a cash basis, even though our audit is on an accrual. So the cash balance as of July 1, 2021 was $6,886,409. And when you look at the next line, line 5, local sources, they're all 1,000. So that includes property taxes, it includes student registration payments. When we get into operations and well, even in the ed fund, it includes some of the CEDAL revenue that we get from running our facility to CEDAL, because they have built into that some educational components. The 2,000s are from one district to another district, and right now we don't have any of those. The 3,000 are all state money, and the majority of that is what used to be called general state aid and now is EBF, and I'm kind of blanking on what EBF is.
Evidence-based funding.
Okay, evidence-based funding. It also includes all the categorical, so there'll be like special ed, some of the residentials in there, any of the, you know, when we get into the if you got into the transportation, that includes transportation, but any dollars that come directly either from the state or through the state. And then the federal sources are all of our federal grants. And previously, up until a couple of years ago, our special ed grants used to come from the state to the special ed co-op and then to the district. But now they come directly to Milburn. So then you can see then the total for the education fund is $15,498,009. We are going to have to plug in a number, and I apologize, I left it out. The on behalf payments at number 10. That's the money that we have to put in there that the state contributes to their teacher retirement system. And we never know how much that is until after the year is complete and they're actually doing the audit. I can tell you that in FY20, which was 2 budget years ago, it was $6,180,303. So I'm going to guess that we're probably going to want to plug in here something, and you always want to guess high. So I'm going to probably plug in about $7.5 million when I bring this back for approval by the board. So go ahead and put in $7.5 million in there, Jason, if you can.
So that's about 20% increase for 2 years?
It is, but it won't be that high. But they write you up in the audit if you guess too low.
Okay.
So if you guess too high, it's
Okay.
okay, but if you guess too low, it's not. And you'll see when we get down a little bit further, that same number is gonna show up in the expenses. So
Okay.
it zeroes out, it doesn't make any difference to the budget. I always kinda call it funny money,
Okay.
because this is what the state's supposed to contribute, whether they actually do or not, we really don't know.
We never see it, never
Yeah.
goes through our bank account.
We never get any of that money at all, is, taken care of
Yeah.
at the state level.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that's where it really goes, but, this is a whole big part of the problem with the teacher retirement system.
Right.
The IMRF system, we pay what IMRF tells us to pay, and it's, 90% funded. Whereas TRS, the state pays the majority of our portion of it, and it's not nearly as well funded.
Okay.
From the disbursements then, all the instructional lines are 1,000. So that would include, the teaching staff, any materials that we purchase, not curriculum, because it's a 2,000, it's a support service. But the 2,000s include, speech therapists, psychologists, social workers. I believe that the, Library and Media Center numbers are in there, so there's several, it's all the things that support the instruction. And you can see that the instruction, the 1,000 line is the largest line, because that's where the bulk of our money goes. And then a little less than half of that is the support services. In our case, the community services, there's about $1,500 in the Title I grant that's under community services. But the bulk of community services is our before and after school program. And then payments to other districts is primarily our payments to CEDAW, and those are the 4,000 line. In the education fund, we don't pay any debt service. And we could, if we wanted, put a contingency amount in there. And if we put a dollar amount in there, then the board has the authority to transfer money from there elsewhere within that education fund, if need be by resolution during the school year, or during the budget year. So then you can see that right now the direct disbursements or expenditures are $15,034,509. And then the on behalf that we put in the 7.5 million, it still shows 7.5. So they're saying revenue is 7.5, expenditures is 7.5. So the total disbursements, including on behalf, is 22,534,509. And then basically saying that there's an additional 463,500 based on revenue and expenses. So you're actually coming out positive. If you look over debt service, it's showing a negative. So go ahead and scroll down some more. Go back up. Okay. All right, so let's go down and then come back up. So these are expenditures out of the ed fund. 201,018 is taxes pledged to pay principals on capital leases. And then there's also interest on capital leases. Those are our payments that have to be transferred into the debt service fund to pay the Apple leases. And then scroll over to go back up and then scroll to the right. And then you see the $3,000 out of debt service. Basically, we can always transfer the interest, debt service, and earns to any other fund. So now scroll back up to the 7,000s. So you can see here's the 201,018 and the 2173 that are paying the leases that basically got moved from education to debt service. And then the $3,000 from debt service, the interest got moved into operations and maintenance. And that can be moved, we can choose whichever fund we want to move that to. So if there's a fund that is always going over or is very close to not being balanced, we can always push that interest money not only from debt service, but from other funds into there. I didn't, in this budget, put anything additional in there only because the interest rate is so low that, the education fund more than likely needs to keep any interest it makes. But debt service, if we don't move it out during the fiscal year, then you aren't gonna be able to move it out until after all of your debt is paid. And then you have very specific uses you have to use it for. If we move it now, prior to the end of the year, then, we can use it for anything. Go ahead and scroll down some more, there's a little bit more.
Wait, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you go back up to right there? So can we take the excess direct receipts from the educational and use it to pay out the debt service? Or is that?
No, you don't wanna do that.
You don't wanna do that?
No, the debt service, the county sets the levy,
Okay.
and, even though it's showing that as a negative, it's, the reason it's a negative,
In the cash.
it's a negative in cash, but we still have a, positive balance, and we'll get to the balance one at the end. So it's just basically saying that we're spending $156,000 more than we're taking in.
Okay.
But the county, when they do our levy, we don't really get a whole lot of opportunity to do much with that. They look at our debt payments, and I believe they add 1%, and that's how much they apply to, they allow us to, borrow, or to, not to borrow, but to tax.
It's called loss and cost, right?
Right, loss and cost. Okay, don't scroll back up just a little bit more, okay. One of the things that they did, I believe it was 2 years ago, is we used to have, what was it, 30,000 or 40,000 in activity accounts. And most of them were really more convenience accounts, where kids would pay money for field trips and then we would write a check. But they really weren't student-driven. They really weren't student activity accounts where students controlled, with supervision from the administration, how those monies were spent, and they weren't earning, they weren't raising money, they weren't selling product, etc. So basically, all of those convenience type things had to be moved into the education fund. So they're in the part that we already reviewed. But the amounts that are left in there are here. So right now, scroll up just a tiny bit. So the estimated beginning balance, July 1, was $10,660. So about 20 to 30,000 less than what it was 3 or 4 years ago. Receipts, and I basically just looked at what we received in receipts last year, $813. And last year we spent $3,230, which in this case it's showing that we spent $2,417 more than we took in. And after we do this for a few years, we'll get better at being able to estimate what those revenue and expenses are. But this is basically to be more transparent so the public can see any student activity money. Now this also includes, there's like a sunshine fund for each building that is teacher money that's raised like from the soft drink machines and those kind of things. That is still in there. We also have some money in there from the choir club or the choir that's in there. And I can't think, but it's in the report, all the different funds that still have money in them. Each month at the second meeting, you get an activity report, and that shows each fund and how much there is in there and how much was received and expended. So what they do is they add in this $8,243 into the beginning balance, to show the beginning balance there is $6,897. And then it kind of goes through the same scenario again, but then your ending balance, your excess of receipts includes the activity funds, and then the estimated ending balance is at the bottom that includes the student activity funds. So basically now you have two different ending balances, one without the activity funds and one with the activity funds. In our case, the activity funds are pretty minimal, so it's almost, it's very close to the same number. Now go ahead and scroll on down some more. The other thing that I like about this portion of the budget is it also tells you in the education fund exactly how much of that total budget is salaries, employee benefits, purchase services, which includes software, any people that come out just to do repairs, not including the cost of the materials, but just the professional service they provide. It also includes any money we spend on staff development, speakers, travel. It also includes registration costs. So for instance, a registration for the III will come out of a 300 object. The 400 objects are all supplies and materials, paper, pencils, ink, markers, anything that is consumable. Toner, lots of toner. We go through a lot of that. I probably, just for the printers, 15,000–20,000 a year. Capital outlay, our expenses, our capital threshold at Milburn is $2,500. So any improvement or piece of equipment that we purchase that each item costs more than $2,500 has to be listed as capital outlay, and then that also goes on our fixed asset, our list of fixed assets, and then those are depreciated over time, and that's something that's included in the audit. Other objects, 600, typically those are, in most cases, it's memberships to professional organizations. So for instance, the membership to ISBA, or IASB, it was ISBA in Indiana. IASB is going to be paid out of a 600 object. And then non-capitalized equipment is something that's not a capital outlay, and it's also not a supply. So it's anything over $500, but less than $2,500. So, you know, for instance, all of our, like the teacher laptops are all gonna fall in there because they're about $1,000 a piece, $1,000, $1,200. The iPads won't though, because they're $399. They're less than $500. And then termination benefits, the only termination benefit that we are currently paying out is health insurance, and we'll pay up to $300 a month for our retirees for 4 years after they retire. Now we will have, probably not for a couple more years, there will be some post-retirement payments that are in the current contract that very soon we're going to have people that are going to start receiving those payments once they retire, but that's still another year or two away. And then it shows the total expenditures, but you've got that same breakout for each fund. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, if you click on the estimated revenue, if you want to see, like for instance, what's in a 1,000 on the bottom, the tab. 2 over, yeah. Oh, can you make that bigger? Okay, so scroll up. So here's one. So here you can see the property tax is $8,301,000. There's also a separate special education levy. So of that $1,000 series, 9.1 million of that is property taxes. And then scroll down a little bit more and you'll see that the tuition is actually the registration fees, so $256,000 in registration fees. Tuition from other districts, $302,000. We have some students here at Milburn, both at the elementary and the middle school, primarily in the SLP program or the autism spectrum, where other districts, it's separate from CEDAL, but kind of like CEDAL, we're kind of our mini co-op, where they will send their students here rather than sending them to CEDAL. I think we also have a few that are in the early childhood program as well. And those are districts that are too small to have enough students to have a class. So it kind of helps us and it helps them at the same time. But if you want to know exactly what the detail is for both revenue or expenses, you can flip over to those other tabs. And I believe that I sent all of you, gosh, whenever we put this on public display, I sent you a link on the drive that you can actually access the spreadsheet if you want to look at any of those items. But you know, we're still in the 1000s. And then we get into the 1800s, and then soon we'll be at the 2000s, which I don't believe there's anything in there. Yeah. And then we're at the 3000s. So there's the evidence-based funding. And basically that's all that we have. We get anything from there. And then when you scroll down, you'll see the special education private facility. State free and reduced breakfast doesn't really do us a whole lot of good. We're hoping we'll get about $250. And we used to see, no, it's always been federal, but the federal dollars in school lunch is going to be higher this year because we're in the seamless summer option where no students have to pay and the federal government's reimbursing the district at a higher rate. So. Anybody have any questions, or does this help you kind of understand a little bit more about how it all works? And all the things off here then flow to those other pages. So basically I go in and we start filling in the revenue and the expenses, and then those flow back to those budget summary and the cash summary pages. But any of the transfers I have to put in manually. If nobody has any questions, that was all I had prepared for that. It's kind of the same for each of the funds. The only fund that doesn't have any expenses is the working cash fund. And the only way that we can transfer money out of working cash is by board resolution. You can either do I'm not going to get the term correctly, but you can either do a partial transfer or you don't close out the fund, or you can actually close out the fund. Ideally, you probably don't want to do that because then that makes it more difficult then to come back and be able to levy in that fund again in the future. But I know when I first came here, we had $3,000 or $4,000 in that fund, and every year they would do a resolution to move that money into the education fund, and then we would get another $3,000 or $4,000 the next year, and then they move it into the education fund. And this is kind of the fund that I look at as your savings account, kind of your emergency fund. It does count as part of the education fund, but if you scroll down, by the end of FY22, we should have a balance of about just a little under $700,000 in that fund. So that makes me a little more comfortable that if we go over a little bit in the education fund or one of the other funds, that kind of covers you for having some additional revenue available in the event of an emergency. That's it.
Okay. $50,000 mentioned facilities grant.
I did put some things, and I apologize, I didn't send the report to you until yesterday, but the two things that are kind of high on my list of things to look at is the roof on the East Gym, and I have a couple photos that I added that show where the roof is now again starting to slit somewhere, and I didn't look up the exact date, but somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, we did just a partial. We took the roofing material from the the brick wall that surrounds the roof down and basically cut in and merge that together. So the outside portion that's exposed to the light is, was all new. Now it's starting to do the same thing it had done at that point. That roof is approximately 23 years old. And the roof on the east gym is in worse shape than the other roofs surrounding it that were done at the same time. And it's basically so in the first one you can see where basically just with the expansion and contraction with the heat that it's actually popped that seam, and there's several of those as you go around on the roof. And then the other thing here where it's on the parapet, the brick wall, the material is no longer adhered to the brick wall. It's actually pulling out and kind of loose and spongy. So basically it's, you know, before it was up against the brick wall and then, you know, had a nice angle then to the roof. Now this is actually and I'm blanking on the name, the type of roofing it is, but basically it's a roofing material and then it's covered with rocks to hold the material down. In some ways it actually helps preserve the roofing material because it covers and keeps it shaded so it doesn't get as hot and doesn't get the sunlight that causes degradation. On the other hand, if you do get a leak in the main body of it, because you've got those rocks, it makes it very difficult to find where that leak is. You've got to pull the rocks aside and then try and locate the leak. If we were to re-roof this, we probably would recommend a different type of roofing material, and that's something that I'm still discussing with the architects, although the three types of roofs that we would consider are basically all about the same cost. So part of it is just looking at the pros and cons of each type of roof to determine what you do. And I do have some, now the $50,000 matching grant, you have to spend at least $100,000. We pay 50 and the state pays 50. If, you know, in this case, like area 1, which is the main roof of the major portion where the East Gym is, the estimate for that is $241,500. Area 2 is estimated at $25,300. Area 3 is estimated at $80,500, and Area 4 is estimated at $12,650. So if we were going to do that portion, we probably would bid it with alternates. So we would bid the East Gym roof as the base, because we may end up getting fantastic pricing, and you may want to go ahead and do everything, or we may get pricing may come in higher than what we thought, and maybe all we can afford to do is that one. Now the other area that, scroll back up there, the other area that we were looking at, other project we were looking at is possibly looking at starting to replace some of the existing flooring. We have two different areas. We have the area down by the East Gym that we've had a few of the tiles there that have popped up, but the majority of them just look bad because they don't fit snugly together. As you walk in that building, it's not a really nice looking. And then it would abut to the flooring that we just did in the older section, and but all we're looking at here would be doing main hallways. Or we could look in the 1999-2000 edition and do the main hallway all the way to the cafeteria, and then do the main hallway over to the corner of the building. And that's what they gave us pricing on, or estimated pricing. And we'll get something a little bit more firm as we get closer within the next 2 weeks. But they estimated that area 1, which is the larger area on the left in the 99-2000 edition, would be about $124,000 to replace all that with the LVT like we did in the other areas of the building where we've replaced the tile. Or the other section over by the East Gym was estimated at $71,300. So with that, we probably would want to, if we did that area, we'd probably want maybe even to extend it over through that hallway to where the main hallway is to get up to the 100,000, because they want you to have one project. Personally, if you had the potential, the roof on the East Gym is 23 years old and was built in 1998, was added in 1998. And typically those roofs, that's what it showed on my diagram. Are you saying it's older? I had a diagram that I found that showed it in 1998. I don't know if it really was or not.
Yeah, the building was not built then, is that what you're saying?
No, the East Gym.
Right.
Was that maybe done in conjunction with?
Gym, did they replace the roof at the same time they did the new section?
That's what I'm thinking they did,
I'd have to go back and clarify that.
yeah. I just found a diagram that showed that this was something that Green gave me, which I'm assuming they would have been the ones that did it.
Yeah.
So it showed that section was done in 1998, so it's about 23 years old. Typically, that type of roof lasts 20 to 25 years. We want to get maybe a roofing company out to look at it, to check the condition of it. If we did a repair to that, you might get another 4 or 5 years out of it. But the estimated patching was about $103,000, so about 40% of the cost of replacing it. And then you're looking at only getting, maybe 5 years instead of 25 or 30 years out of a new roof. So that's something that, and we've already done that patching once.
I've got a question in relation to these roofs versus the roofs of the original structure. Are they different?
Those are, yes.
So the 74 or 77 one, the old part, that was a different type of roof, have those ever been replaced?
All the roofs except the roofs in that drawing. Those are the only ones on the elementary school that haven't been replaced,
Okay.
except for the 99-2000 edition, which those were probably put on either in 98 or 99 because they finished the exterior first and then worked inside. So those are the next oldest roofs in the district. And then after that is the middle school, which was built in 2007. So those are about 14 years old. 2005, okay. I always get that date wrong. So those are actually about 16 years old.
So that entire area on the west side, that's all roofs that are 20 years old?
Yep.
Correct. But I can tell you they're in much better condition. For instance, this old section of the building, the 1961 original building, when you walked on that roof, it crunched. I mean, literally, it was, as soon as it was alligatored, it was really in bad shape. When we removed that roof to replace it, all the insulation was soaked with water, so it really hadn't, I mean, there wasn't water coming into the building, but that insulation really had no insulation, didn't do a good job of insulating because it was soaked with water, and when insulation is soaked with water, it doesn't insulate well. So literally, we probably waited too long to replace that, but everything, everything on the west side, with the exception of the pieces in red, have all been replaced in the last 10 years. Actually, I take that back. I think that black roof was 1998 as well, but it's actually I'm not going to say it's rubber, but it's a black roof. I'd have to have the architects tell me exactly what type of roof it is, but basically it's in pretty decent shape.
So the reason I was asking is because, so the area in red right now, what was that, about 240,000? What was it?
Well, just that area
the
number
three,
one
two,
is
three.
240,000.
Oh, got it, and it was like 80
And
and
then-
then 20 or something? So
Pardon?
about 350-ish thousand for all of it? 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, 260. Yeah, 350 to 360.
And then in the not too distant future, in the next 5 years or so, everything on the west side is gonna need to be replaced as well, right?
I would, you know, it's kind of one of the things that you may wanna do, and they do have, there are services that will do it where they will do a kind of a flyover and they do an infrared scan of the building and they can tell, you know, if the roof is, if there's moisture under the roof, and they can give you a better idea of the condition of the roof so that you can make some decisions. If it's still in decent shape, there actually is, and I know that one of the districts that did some solar work, it's like, and we actually had somebody here that when we were talking to it about solar, that proposed it. There's a, where they can put another layer on top of the existing roof without replacing it.
Mhm.
That's a little bit cheaper, that will give you at least another 10 to 15 years of use. So that may even be something to consider at that point.
And then
But there are ways that we
uh,
can check on the, you know, how good the roof is and how well it's continuing to protect the interior.
And the flooring, you mentioned that's really cosmetic in nature. Like there's no actual damage to the floor.
Well, the floor basically is like crumbling, it cracks, and then we've been replacing individual tiles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's something that we can probably deal with that. It just doesn't look as good because then you've got different color tiles because we're pulling out attic stock that's not as warm, but it's only a safety issue when you've got chunks missing or whatever.
Yeah.
So as long as we can keep up with it, it's probably not as much of a critical item, but it is something that you wanna keep on the radar down the road to look at replacing. The other thing too is then if you replace it with the LVT tile, then you'll actually have more time for your custodians to do other things in the building because all it requires is damp mopping. It doesn't require, you know, stripping and waxing every year. The only way you would ever have to strip and wax is if somebody decided that it, and I did talk to somebody who in their district, they decided it wasn't shiny enough, so they waxed it. And when you wax it, you're gonna constantly have to strip and wax it every year because that takes that protective finish off the top of the vinyl tile. So I guess what I'm saying is, personally, I think probably the roofing is probably the most critical, and I'll get some more information on what revenues we have, what funds we have available, et cetera, so that you can make a little bit better decision. But this is something that will have to be decided at the next meeting because the grant is due October 8th, and it didn't open up until August 31st. So we didn't even find out this was even available till probably the middle of August. But it is something that whenever the state's willing to give you $50,000, if you spend $50,000, it's well worth it to take advantage of those dollars.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
I'll get you more information as we get closer.
IASD board member recognition. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. We have 3 master board members, level 1, Sean and Stephen, and Brendan's level 2. So the board has different, the Illinois Association of School Boards has different levels of certification if you complete certain coursework and commit to training and attendance at, like the fall dinner that's coming up. You get recognized for that participation over time, so congratulations.
Does anyone have any other future agenda items besides press policy updates? superintendent's report.
Okay, as the board knows, Jose, this is his last meeting, so I wanna thank Jose for his time serving on the board, and he is moving out of our community, so, with the family, and good luck to you in your next adventure.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Very quickly, just wanted to officially share, that it's been, a pleasure to be part of this community. We're probably our biggest disappointment with my wife and my children is that we have to leave this fantastic school system, though I feel like we've already, been very close to in the 2 short years that we've been a part of it. And then it's been an honor working with all of you, serving the community and hopefully doing our part to make this district even better. So it's been a great experience. I really appreciate learning from all of you, and best of luck.
Good luck. Yeah.
Good luck to you.
Good luck to you.
Thank you. With Jose leaving, his resignation is effective tomorrow, since tonight is the last meeting. We have 60 days to fill that position. So what we have done in the past is advertise to the community that we have an open position, taken applications from community members that are interested, and then at our next meeting, we would review those applications and narrow it down potentially to 2 or 3 candidates, or however many the board decides to do a face-to-face interview at the following meeting, and then make an appointment after doing those interviews. So that's kind of the narrowing down process. Some of you have been part of that process actually already, so nothing too new there. And we'll have to do that and then appoint at the October, I believe, 20-something at board meeting, make an appointment officially.
I think it's the 25th.
25th sounds right, but I didn't want to say for sure.
What's a Monday?
We'll take it.
In October.
If it's the 4th Monday in
It
October,
is.
I'm guessing that's the one. So we'll go through that process. Yeah, any questions about that?
That's all just posted on the website with like the documentation and whatever people need.
Yeah, the only thing they need is to send us a resume.
Okay.
And what I do is when people send me interest or say I'm interested, I send them back. There's a couple of pamphlets that you guys probably seen over time where it's the kind of the school board governance basics. So I send them back that just so they have more information. Sometimes they say, okay, no thanks, or sometimes they say, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, thank you, appreciate it, and submit their application, so. Thank you all for that. Any other questions about that process? I don't have a whole lot of an update about our testing situation. We are in critical short supply of testing supplies now, since there's been an uptick in COVID cases and more people getting tested as a result of that, and us going back into school as a country, and the state of Illinois having testing protocols and encouraging that and getting that going. Now suddenly there's a severe shortage of testing supplies, everything from the vials that you need to do for depositing saliva to the other test kits are the Hvac Now test kits have a different swab in your nose. They can't get they can't get supplies, so there's a shortage. So I don't know when that's going to be up and running, but we are scheduled to start next week with students. There's about 450 students that signed up to do that, which is double what I expected. So we will see how that goes. I think it's going to be, in talking to other school districts, it's a little rocky at the start to get it going, to get the process down, but once it gets going, it's pretty easy and flows pretty well. It's very helpful. So We'll do the two different types of testing. One is the shield testing, which is you deposit saliva in a vial. The student spits in a vial till it hits the line, then they put the cap on it, put it in a bucket, and go back to class. The other one is the Hvac now, which is in the lower region of your nose. They just swish around a swab in the lower part of your nose, wipe it on a piece of paper, and then in 15 minutes, there's a result that's read by our nurses. Or it could be administrators. A lot of school districts are training administrators. I prefer to have the nurses do that if we can, but that one is for test to stay. That's for a different purpose than the shield testing. Shield is called surveillance testing because you're doing it to kind of surveil and understand what COVID is doing in your school. And the Hvac is a quick and easy read if someone is symptomatic. Fairly accurate. The positives are very, very accurate. The negatives are a little less accurate, but still pretty good.
The ratios of the students who signed up in each school, are they about even? Or is that higher than
Pretty
the
even. There's fewer kids that are eligible at the middle school because 7th and 8th graders are eligible for vaccinations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good chunk of our students who are already vaccinated and they wouldn't be eligible for the program. So therefore, fewer kids at the middle school signed up. So it was about half of elementary. Okay, that's for testing. Goal setting, and visioning, kind of a visioning reboot. We've talked a little bit about that. We're going to talk more about it at our administrative team meeting tomorrow. We've really been on sort of a reactionary, operational, logistical mode for about 2 years, it seems like, and haven't had that chance to really sustain conversations about goal setting and vision and what we should be talking about as a school district and as a board. So my hope is that we get back to more of that as things hopefully come to not a calm, but a steady roar, and be able to talk more to the board about that. So at our next board meeting, I'd like to share and take some more time to talk about what our vision is, what our vision statement was back 2 years ago or a year and a half ago when we first created it, and kind of reconfirm that and share that with the board. And that's all I have.
You were gonna talk about Woodlands intergovernmental agreement?
Oh, yes, I am in closed session.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
I wasn't thinking.
That's okay. We will have to do a closed session, brief closed session too. As well. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. Business office report.
Okay. A couple things in my report that we haven't talked about yet. We did have an issue with the, actually furniture update. We've got all but 44 of the Melbourne Elementary desks. And we had 2 of the desks in the middle school that were received with damage. And then we had 4 desks we received here that have the wrong color top. So the vendor's working on that, and hopefully we'll get the other 44 soon. But we did get a shipment the Friday before Labor Day, so I think I left here about 6 or 6:30 that day. Because we had a big semi that came that all except a small portion of that was Melbourne's. The budget, that really hasn't changed. As far as next meeting is the public budget hearing and the budget adoption. And the budget has to be adopted by September 30th. I do want to mention quickly the HVAC rooftop replacements at the elementary building. Hopefully that background information is adequate, but basically one of the units that cools the outer offices in the elementary office had to have 3 pounds of Freon added to it, and it only holds 5.6 pounds of Freon. And we've had problems with that unit 5, 7 years, maybe even longer. But more and more frequently, both with that unit as well as I think the rooftop that does the main office portion, especially on Monday mornings, it wouldn't come back on again after the weekend. And so they'd have to go up and flip the switch to turn it on. Occasionally, that happened during the week, and I think within the last several months, they've had to do that more and more during the week, where it wouldn't reset on Monday, and they tried all sorts of things with the controls. But those are also things that both of the units are between 22 and 23 years old, and a rooftop air conditioning heating unit has a life expectancy of 15 to 20 years. So we definitely have gotten, good use out of them. We did end up having to order a Rheem brand rooftop unit because that could ship out within a week. The train units that we have currently up there, a train replacement would have been a 12-week waiting period before it could have even shipped to us. It does make sense to go ahead and do both of them at the same time. They're both the same age, both have similar issues, except the other one hasn't lost the 3 pounds of Freon yet. But and then the other thing is it saves money because you have to have a crane to take the old ones off and put the new ones on. So it's cheaper to have a crane one time to do both units than to have a crane come once and do the outer office and then maybe 6 months or whatever later coming back and doing another one because you're going to pay the same cost for that crane rental as well as the labor. It doesn't take nearly as long to pull 2 off as it does. It doesn't take that much longer to pull off 2 than it does pull off 1. So the cost of that installed is, I believe, $19,200 or something like that. $19,210. Now there are other issues with how that system works, and one of the things I had the architects and the engineer review the prints and the information before we actually did anything, because if we ever want to look at fixing to make those units so it better controls the temperatures in each of those areas, I wanted to make sure that that same rooftop unit would work if we decided to do that later, and they assured me that it would. For now, we're going to go ahead and use the existing Johnson controls that are already on the roof. If we find there are issues there, then we can deal with that later as well. But basically, the way the units are set up, they're a VVT system, which means in the summertime, whichever office is the warmest, then the air conditioner is going to cool to keep that office that's the hottest, get that down to the temperature that's set, which means that everybody else is going to be freezing. And the same thing in the winter, it does the same thing. Whichever room is the coldest then it tries to heat up all the other offices. And so, like I said, the VVT system is the cheapest, but a VAV system actually would allow you to control those temperatures, and I don't have those costs now, but there would be a cost because there's piping and hot water that has to be run up to those areas so that it can better control the temperatures.
What do you need to modify the duct system though?
There are some modifications, and I didn't get into all those details. I just wanted to make sure if the board decided later to make those modifications that it would work with the rooftop units that we were speccing. But that is something in the future that you may want to look at. It may be that replacing the rooftop units that are 23 years old may solve most of the issues, hopefully. But if it doesn't, just know there are other things that could be done in the future that you could look at, and then you'll have to prioritize, which is preferable, which things you want to do versus when you look at your laundry list of items that need to be done. That's the highest priority. EAV, we did get an estimate from the Lake County Chief County Assessment Officer. It's usually pretty accurate. It's showing that our assessed value went up about $7 million And 508,948 of that is new construction. I'm guessing a portion of that is the, senior housing development, but I'm gonna guess probably not all of it is, but maybe. That represents about a little over $1.5 million as far as market value. But the other thing that happened during COVID as well is you had people doing remodeling of their homes, replacing roofs, replacing siding because of windstorms, et cetera, and those all add to the assessed value of the property. But, you know, it's positive. I think the 508,000 in new construction is one of the higher numbers I've seen in the last 6 or 7 years, maybe even 8 years. So I thought that was a positive, and I wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Can you tell us what 508,000 means in cash to the district next year?
I could if I'd done my homework ahead of time. I can't tell you off the top of my head. Yeah, it'd be based on the tax rate.
Tax rate is 6% of that, so.
Okay, so you divide that by 100, and then multiply it times 1.06.
That's 6 times 5, 30,000. So
Yeah.
it's 30,000
Yeah.
bucks. Means $35,000 for a district dish.
And that's outside the cap. We're capped with the CPI rate, and we won't know that until probably March of next year, because it's whatever it was. I think it's December 31st compared to the December 31st prior. And so it uses that number as a percentage, but then we'll get this on top of that. So we'll get an extra 30,000. Now, if we were getting a new factory or a new business, we'd get even more, but there's the information on the matching grant. Oh, and then just 2 other items, the HVAC and temperature controls. I've been talking for quite a while, I believe, about the fact that we still have a portion of the building that runs off a compressor pneumatic controls that sometimes don't do a good job and don't allow us to control the things that we want to control. I do have a proposal from Johnson Controls that I'll have the architect look at. I've talked a little bit with Nitro Gas about it as far as energy incentives and rebates, but I also want to talk with ComEd because you won't have the electric running to run the compressor. So I'm guessing that we'll be able to get some energy rebates from that. I know the proposal that I have is $65,000 to $75,000 to do that work, and I want to see how much we can get back in rebates as well. But it's one of those that if we don't do something within the next 6 months or a year, we're going to have to replace the compressor because that thing runs almost 24/7. Every time I walk by, you hear it running away, going away. And this is actually, we've replaced it once since I've been here. And I think when we did that, we were hoping it would just be temporary. And then the phone system, we have enough funds in life safety. That's part of our life safety plan to replace the district phone system. But when you start looking at phones, there's so many variables that I'm talking to the architect to see if they have somebody on staff that can help us work through that process and develop an RFP, so that then we can get apples to apples. But part of what we've got to make some determinations about is, do we want to do a cloud-based system where all we have are the phones here and everything, all the phone equipment is somewhere, that we reach via the cloud? Or do we actually want to have the actual phone system and voicemail system and everything on site at one of our 2 buildings? And there's pros and cons to doing both of those. At one point, we were talking about doing something with District 117 that includes Lakes High School, and having them host us on their site. And I think at that point, we were almost ready to pull the switch, and then all of a sudden, the cost of the system, with all the things that they, at the last minute, decided we needed, and not Lakes, but the vendor that was trying to sell it to us, all of a sudden, the price went up from like $60,000 to I don't know, it went up $40,000 or $50,000. So at that point, we put the brakes on because we didn't have those funds available at that point. So, and as we move further on that, then I'll keep you updated, but I wanted you to be aware of things that were kind of going on in the background, so that when they come up, they won't be a surprise to you, because I do know we have several people on the board now that may not have been on the board when we talked about this last. Do they have any questions for me?
I had a question about the pneumatic Johnson. Is that separate and distinct from the rooftop Johnson controls?
Yes. Well, I mean, it would be a part of that same system.
Okay.
Because at both buildings, I can actually go on and access and control the majority of the areas in each building. With the area that's in pneumatics, you can kind of set temperatures and do some real basic things, but you can't control dampers. You can't do some of the things that would, some of them actually just kind of operate, I hate to say it, on their own, but without little control, with
Okay.
little control. So this would actually give us the ability to control them more, be able to pull in more fresh air or less fresh air depending on what we're doing, as well as control the temperatures. And then we also have a couple areas that I want to look into when we have rooms that are overheating, and what can we do there. I know that we had one area that was overheating where now is the CEDOL office. And when we did some life safety work, we put a univent in there because it needed to be pulling in fresh air. It didn't have that capability. 217 is kind of the same way. It really overheats in the winter. And then the air conditioner kicks on and then you get all this cold air blowing down on you, which isn't very efficient to be doing that. So I want to look and see if we can do something similar there as well.
All right, thank you. Do we have any board reports? Adjourn to closed session, just one, just two. For the purpose of collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. We have a roll call vote on that?
We need a motion.
A motion on that. My brain is a little tired.
I move to adjourn to closed session.
Second? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Correct.
Ms. Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes?
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Federini?
Yes.
Mr. Quinones?
Yes.
The motion passed.
Thank you. And when we return, we will just be closing. We will be taking no action or discussion.